My aunt transferred her legendary vineyard into a blind trust with one brutal condition. Anyone who tries to liquidate the land personally assumes it's corporate debt. My cousin sneered. A legal loophole won't stop my buyout. The very next morning, he brought in the bulldozers. I didn't even call the police. When the dust finally settled, my cousin walked off the property owing millions. Here is what he didn't comprehend. Aunt Margaret had been orchestrating this trap for 3 years. I relocated to the Willamette Valley the spring after the 2021 wildfires nearly wiped out her Pinot Noir crop. Her insurance adjuster used the word unsalvageable, and I remember sitting in her kitchen feeling a pit form in my stomach. She was 72, managing a 100-acre estate she had cultivated since 1982. A rolling property with a century-old oak tree she treated with near religious reverence. She wasn't frail, but she was exhausted. So, I packed my life in Denver and moved into the drafty bunkhouse above the tractor garage. I told myself it was just for one harvest season. That was 4 years before her heart gave out. I learned the rhythm of the soil. I woke up at 3:15 am to ignite smudge pots when frost threatened the buds. I spent 3 days covered in grease replacing the transmission on a John Deere tractor. I learned which local suppliers she trusted, that she balanced her ledger in pencil, and that she couldn't sleep unless the barn doors were double padlocked. These are the intricate mechanics you only learn by standing in the mud with someone. My cousin Nathaniel lived 3 hours north in Seattle, senior vice president at a venture capital firm, a guy who sent artisanal gift baskets for her birthday. He simply viewed the world through the lens of asset liquidation. Whenever I mentioned the farm needed capital, a new frost fan, or structural repairs, he'd sigh and say, "Let me know what the raw on that looks like." I stopped asking. People value different things. What I completely missed was that Margaret had a sharper read on his greed than anyone realized. In November 2022, she asked me to drive her to Salem and gave me an address for a federal agricultural land conservancy. I assumed she was applying for a drought grant. She didn't explain, just said she had zoning paperwork to file. I sat in my truck for 3 hours while she met with a panel of trustees. What she was doing, quietly and with lethal precision, was severing her empire. She legally dissolved the connection between the physical dirt and the business entity. She transferred the deed and the highly lucrative water rights into an irrevocable agricultural trust with me, named as the sole beneficiary. Then, she left the original corporate shell, Margaret Vineyards LLC, to Nathaniel, the cat. She deliberately loaded that LLC with $4 million in toxic agricultural loans. She also embedded a poison pill. If the LLC attempted to sell land it no longer owned, the debt immediately accelerated and became the personal liability of the managing director, namely, Nathaniel. She never breathed a word of this to me. She just kept drinking coffee on the porch, asking about the soil pH. When she passed, Nathaniel showed up 48 hours later with 2 flatbed trucks carrying excavation equipment and a luxury resort developer. He stood in the driveway and handed me an eviction notice. His argument was corporate restructuring, that he, as the new owner of the LLC, had sold the acreage for $8 million to build a boutique hotel. He was incredibly confident. It was almost sad watching him go up against an ironclad federal trust and 3 years of notarized estate planning. The confrontation lasted 20 minutes. The county agricultural commissioner pulled into the driveway. He didn't yell, he just handed Nathaniel the trust documents. "You don't own a single blade of grass here," the commissioner explained. "You own a shell company that is currently $4 million in the red. And by initiating a fraudulent commercial sale, you just made yourself personally responsible for every penny." Nathaniel's developer contact got in his Mercedes and drove away. Nathaniel's cell phone started ringing. It was the bank. I didn't stay to listen. I walked back to the main house and looked out the kitchen window at the massive oak tree. She had always talked about building a proper cedar bench under its branches. I built it myself 6 weeks later. It fits perfectly in the shade. Some people think the corporate debt trap was the masterstroke, legally flawless and clean. But that's not what Margaret ultimately built. What she built was a fortress around the land she loved. She made the soil impossible to pave over after she was gone. The toxic LLC just ensured that the only person who paid the price for trying to destroy her legacy was the one who never respected it.